Hi everyone. Today, let's go over the CPI report. Then we'll talk options open interest for tomorrow. Then we'll take a look at the charts. And we'll finish up with my results for the day and my positions going into tomorrow. If you like trading stocks and options and making money, definitely like and subscribe. I make videos like this every single day that the markets are open as well as Sundays, so make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Welcome to the Portfolio Bulletin. Let's get started. Looking at the CPI reports, you can see expectations here were 6.2%. For CPI, came in at 6.4%. For CPI, month over month, 0.3, got 0.4. And then core CPI year over year, 5.5 was expectation. And we ended up getting 5.6%. So just over expectations, pretty much across the board. Regular CPI month over month, 0.5 versus 0.4. Just slightly higher than expectations. The markets kind of shrugged this off. Let's go into the deeper report. So looking at all of the CPI reports here, you can see what it's looked like. We've been stepping down month over month, and then we got a pretty big step up here. Definitely not what you want to see. We've certainly stepped up before here recently, but this one was pretty rough, pretty significant step up. And looking at the finer details here, you can see food was up pretty much across the board, energy up. Oil did come down, negative 1.2 here. Used cars and trucks, negative 1.9. That was a little bit surprising. We did think that that might go up a little bit based on interest rates going down a little bit, but it didn't quite work out that way. Apparel, 0.8%. Medical commodities, 1.1%, and then medical services down minus 0.7%. So pretty interesting there. Good to see some negative numbers in the report, but pretty much overall, everything was up. You can see shelter was up 0.7%. This continues to stay pretty stubborn between 0.6 and 0.7 pretty much throughout the year, at least as far back as this goes. It's been up nearly every month. Transportation services up quite a lot over the last 12 months at 14.6%. Gas services, 26.7%. Oil fuel, 27.7%. Still some big numbers in this report, and things are continuing to step up, so definitely not a strong report. And overall, you would think this would have been a little bit more bearish on markets, but the markets kind of shrugged it off and then basically went sideways throughout the day, and the rally in the midday was actually quite strong. Moving over to options open interest for SPY for tomorrow. You can see here a little bit of a reversal, quite a lot of calls going into tomorrow. About 26,000 at 425. Obviously, I don't think we're going to get anywhere near that high. That would be a really strong move from where we are now to that level. I wouldn't really expect to get above 415 or even 417 here. Both of these seem to be a pretty decently high level from where we are now. And then you have strong support still here at 400. So that's kind of the range that you're looking at right now between 400 and 417. That's quite wide, but let's take a look at the actual options in the market right now. Still a lot of puts here at 410. Don't expect to get below 410 tomorrow. You can see that's 121,000 options at that level. Very, very strong level in my opinion. Then you got about 91,000 here at 412, 100,000 at 415. And then looking at max pain here, you can see it's at 413 for tomorrow. Once again, shouldn't expect to be right at that level, but it's a decent center point to work off of for trading. Like I said, I think 410 is going to be a very strong level to the downside for the SPY, and 415 is probably going to be your upper limit tomorrow as well. Moving over to the charts, starting with the S&P 500, I actually have it on the 15-minute here and the 1 hour. I want to look at the shorter time frames just to show the reaction that we had to CPI. You can see this one candle right here, the 730 candle, through that big wick to the upside. Looking at the hourly chart, you can see that took out a lot of these highs, as you would have expected. We talked about that yesterday happening. We did get the rejection, and then we quickly found some support at the 200 SMA on the 15-minute chart, retested those highs, got rejection once again, made a slightly lower low here, but then we rallied throughout the session quite strong, came into a couple of resistances, made new highs once again. It's worth noting that we're selling off fairly strongly here towards the end of the day. This last candle was quite weak. Momentum on the SPY, not as bullish as you would expect based on the rally that we had. Moving over to the 4-hour chart, you can see momentum is still bullish after the rally we had the past 2 days. You can see that one red candle and then the fairly strong reversal candle. We got the 9 EMA up over the 21 here again. This after hours candle might be a little bit of a step down. That'll be something to watch going into tomorrow. Going back over to the 15-minute chart, you can see we're at that 50 level on RSI, something to watch as well. Jumping back up to the hourly chart, you can see We might come into the 50 level on the 1 hour. We'll be looking for that bounce if we're going to get bullish action. Otherwise, we're basically finishing at the 21 EMA, which is certainly an area where you could find some support going into tomorrow. Based on the CPI report being basically as expected, the rally taking out the highs, continuing to find some support at the 144 EMA on the hourly. If this does break down and we don't get below this 109.50 level, basically at the 144 EMA on the 15-minute chart, then you have to expect that tomorrow is going to be bullish. I am positioned a little bit bullish, but the way that this looks and the support that we found going into CPI looks fairly strong to me. Moving over to the NASDAQ on the hour and the 4 hour, you can see we threw those wicks to the upside just like we thought. Did come down and find support at the 144 EMA on the hourly chart, just like the SPY. So this still looks like we're in a bullish trend. All the EMAs are actually in order here to the upside as well. Definitely worth noting, indicating to me that this is still a bullish trend and we do have to respect that. Similarly to the SPY, we are getting a little bit of a sell-off here after hours. We were getting pretty close to 307.50 at the close, and then you can see we got that sell-off, finished just below 307, got all the way down to almost 306 after hours, and then we're getting a little bit of a bounce here right at the end of the day. You can see we're at the SMA on the RSI. You would want to see a bounce there if this is going to continue. If this does break below the RSI tomorrow, that could be an indicator that we might be moving a little bit lower. Otherwise, looking at momentum, bullish momentum on the hourly chart, bullish momentum on the 4-hour chart. Show the daily chart here just for a moment. We did step down just slightly, very, very small step down. When you get these very flat steps down pretty close to the zero line, there's certainly a possibility that you get the reversal back into bullish territory. Very similarly to what we got here. We got fairly consistent steps down. Looked like we were going to get close to reversal here. And then the next candle was a very strong bullish candle on the daily chart. Every once in a while, you get things like that where you get close to that zero line. Here you have the same thing in reverse. The trend was starting to tip down. You can see we're getting decreasing bearish momentum, get close to that zero line, and then all of a sudden you get this big reversal candle, and then you get a couple of steps down in a row. So based on what we saw here today in the bullish candle getting back above the 9 EMA on the daily chart, I would be looking for a potential step up tomorrow. And if that does happen, obviously there's a couple of lines of resistance. Maybe we start looking to 310 as a possible price target if we can get above this 308.60 level. Definitely a couple of levels of resistance above us. But based on these two candles being so strong, you would expect them to go higher here if we can get above those levels. Moving over to the Russell and the Dow on the 4-hour charts, similar thesis. Swept that resistance level, got rejected, came back up to it, retested here, did find some bullish momentum into the close, got above the 50 line here on RSI. Moving over to the Dow, similar thesis, you can see we swept all of the highs just like we thought that we might. Even going back, we took out these highs with that bigger spike on CPI. We got the rejection, came down to the 55 EMA on the 4-hour chart. Found that support, and then we started to rally into the end of the session. EMA's in line here does look slightly bullish. Of course, we've been in this range for a while. You would want to sit hold above, say, 342.50. That would be a nice level. If we could get above there and stay above that level, that would be nice. Got very close to getting above that level yesterday. Got above it in the pre-market session and during the CPI report, but then we got very strong rejection. Like I said, I would like to see this go up, get above this 342.50 level if we're going to move higher. Otherwise, I would want to see a close below the 55 EMA on the 4-hour to indicate this might start rolling over. We have bearish momentum on the 4-hour chart, but we are still above the 50 level on the RSI. Overall, some mixed charts, but slightly bullish. Moving over to Apple and Tesla, you can see here we're still going sideways on both charts. Apple still in this range between about 155 and 150. And we continue to test basically the highs and lows of that range, finishing basically sideways on the day. Not a lot to say here. Momentum slightly bearish, but very weak, still above the 50 line on RSI. Looking at Tesla, we had a very strong day coming up close to that previous high for resistance. If you don't get above that previous high tomorrow, you might want to be looking at a potential double topping pattern. Come up, get the retest, get rejection, and if this breaks down from there, you would expect to get below this next level at 193.50. Tesla, of course, has been very, very strong. Momentum is still swinging in the bullish direction, so it's certainly possible that we get above 214 tomorrow. But if we do test that level and it doesn't happen, then you're going to have to be looking at a potential double top and some potential downside to come on Tesla. If that does happen, that could certainly pull down the NASDAQ, especially because of how strong Tesla has been, and the other major stocks in the NASDAQ have been fairly weak in comparison. Moving over to Alphabet and Meta. Alphabet thought about breaking down through a big old candle to the downside, got the reversal leg, filled almost the entire previous candle, got back into that range, and we're still stuck in that range. It does look slightly bullish now that we do have this strong rejection candle, and we do have momentum continuing to tick in the bullish side. You would expect a push back up to maybe $100. That would be the highs from this previous range. There'll probably be some resistance at 96.50 as well. Pretty much the range from this previous area of consolidation. Overall, slightly bullish because of that reversal and jumping back into the range after just a little bit of weakness. Moving over to Meta, continuing to go sideways here on the daily chart. Momentum continuing to tick to the downside. Let's jump that over to the 4-hour. Not a lot to say here, basically flat. And we're waiting for Meta to make a big move in one direction or the other. Moving over to NVIDIA and AMD, I do want to highlight these today because they have been so strong. They were very strong once again here today, finishing almost at their highs. NVIDIA threatening to make new highs here recently. AMD has a little bit of ways to go to make new highs, but it does seem like it might get above this previous high here at $86. If we do get above that level, then you're looking for $88.75. Certainly could come up here, retest that level, find some support, and then get a bigger push higher. Pretty tight range in there, but does look bullish coming off of this 55 EMA on the 4-hour chart. And like I said, bullish momentum looks very strong here on NVIDIA. Moving over to consumer staples and consumer discretionary on the 4-hour chart. Basically, we got a big reversal of the conditions yesterday. So we saw big red bar, big move down after the 2 days of upside that we saw on consumer staples, indicating to me that people are starting to exit their safety positions. And we saw a reversal here on consumer discretionary as well. Came into support, gapped down into that zone, hit the trend line, and then moved higher. And this is starting to look a little bit like a cup here on consumer discretionary, potentially moving into that 158 level back at the previous high. Momentum on the MACD moving higher. We got through the SMA on the RSI, indicating that we're going higher. Whereas consumer staples are stepping down on momentum, did get a slight bounce off of the SMA on the RSI. But this big red bar definitely took out a lot of the previous movement and does look quite negative. You can see it tried to move a little bit higher and retrace some here, but then got rejected and turned into a big wick. And this looks to me like we're going to be moving lower, probably into the previous level of support down around 72.20 or so. So still continuing to chip sideways here on consumer staples and continuing to show a shift in strength in consumer discretionary. Moving over to transportation on the 4-hour and the daily charts, highlighting on the 4-hour that momentum continues to tick in the bullish direction, did get above the 50 level on RSI, indicating a potential move into some bullish price action. We are at a resistance point here at the 21 EMA here on the 4-hour, so if we do get rejection here, it's certainly possible. We could get kind of trapped between the 21 and the 55. But if this is going to continue in a bullish direction, you would want to see it get above the 21, potentially get back into this 240 level, which would be the base of this kind of midpoint that we had here. So a couple of points of upside potential, then you're going to be looking for that 240 interaction. If we do get rejection at the 240, then you have to look for more downside, potentially taking out that trend line here. But if we do get above 240, then you're looking to about 243, 244 at this next upper trend line. So that's kind of the scenario I'm looking at. Overall, bullish in the short term. It's worth noting that the daily momentum is still bearish despite the bullish day that we had. So that's interesting. RSI still well above the 50 line here on the daily chart as well. Does kind of seem like we're wedging up a little bit. Might be coming up, testing this previous resistance and then looking for the breakout to the downside. In the medium term, certainly possible, but in the short term, you have to look for a little bit of bullishness in my opinion. Moving over to semis on the 4-hour and the daily chart, not a ton to add here from the AMD and NVIDIA charts. Basically, we're at the previous highs. We're at resistance here. If you're going to move higher, you want to do it now. Momentum on the daily chart ticking higher. You're pretty extended on the EMAs here on the MACD, though. Last time we got into this zone, we did get a pretty strong rejection. But it's certainly possible that we continue higher from here. 4-hour chart ticking into bullish momentum. Not quite as extended as the daily chart momentum. We are right at the SMA on the daily RSI, which is a decent level for rejection if you're going to get it. Does make sense. We're right at that previous high here. Like I said, certainly possible we get rejection from that level. Come back in, test the support line one more time. Then you're looking to see if we do get that bounce and make new highs, or if we do get the breakdown, and then you're looking back down at that 229 level potentially. Moving over to the 2-year and the 10-year. Immediately after CPI, we got a huge push higher on the 2-year, probably pricing in the fact that we're going to get 25 basis points, probably this meeting and next meeting at least. Probably more likely that that's going to happen now. And then we basically flatlined at that level. Moving over to the 10-year, similarly, we did rally, but then we kind of broke down here throughout the session, and we're actually back below the previous high now after this move below this 375 level. So we had this previous high through a couple of wicks to that level and then showed weakness. Now we got above it and we're moving lower here. This will be something to watch for tomorrow. If this continues to break down and close below this 375 level, that should be a little bit bullish for tech and a little bit bullish for growth. You can see we got overbought conditions here on both of the yields, potentially indicating that we might be selling off here a little bit. You can see the 10-year is right at the SMA here on RSI, certainly a possible area to bounce. But right now, it definitely looks weak and it seems to be accelerating to the downside just slightly. Moving over to the DXY, not a lot to add here either. Pretty much still within this range. Looking at the hourly chart here, you can see we came in, found some support late in the evening hours before the CPI, testing those previous lows, threw a wick through that previous low you can see here. Found some support, got back into this mid-range, and then we basically finished right there in the mid-range. So you can see the daily chart continuing to be basically flat, slight decrease in momentum. Right now, we're still stuck between that 9 EMA and 55 EMA on the daily charts. Does seem like the 55 EMA is starting to win here a little bit. And if we do get below this 200 SMA here tomorrow on the hourly chart, that might be a pretty big indicator that the dollar is going to be moving lower tomorrow, which should be good for equities, at least in the short term. Moving over to J&K here, you can see we got that sell-off into the close yesterday. CPI came out in the morning. We threw wicks to the downside, took out all the previous lows from yesterday. You can see we found some support down at around 91.50, pretty much at yesterday's close. And then you can see we did get a nice tick up on RSI here. So we had oversold conditions on Friday, had the rally on Monday, and then the sell-off from the end of Monday into Tuesday. But we did get a higher RSI read, tested that SMA on the RSI, and then we found a nice little bounce out of that. If this is going to move higher here, like it looks like it will, you would want it to get above the 50 RSI. Momentum is very bullish on the hourly. You can see how we're ticking up into the green pretty strong. So at this point, you have to be looking at the hourly like a double bottom. You would want to see it take out this midline here at 92.28 or so, fill the gap up to 92.46, 92.50. And then if we can get above those levels, then you have to be looking for a retest of the 55 EMA here, which is currently sitting at 92.75. So a lot of potential for upside if this is a true double bottom, and it does look like a pretty strong double bottom here in the short term. Looking at the 4-hour chart, you can see the bearish momentum is ticking towards the bullish side just slightly. RSI, we're right at the SMA, certainly an area where you could get rejection. If it's going to stay bullish, then want to see it through the SMA and continue higher here. And then on the 4-hour, you can see the 9 EMA sitting at 92.18, which is very close to that midpoint that we talked about on the hourly chart. Moving over to TLT, similarly, we threw wicks to the upside, got rejection, came down, tested the previous lows. 310 continues to be a pretty strong level. Threw some wicks pretty close there and then got a nice bounce throughout the middle session into the end of day. You can see a pretty powerful move here after hours even, looking quite strong. Similarly to J&K, this looks like a little bit of a double bottom here, potentially finding some strength. We got above the 50 level on RSI on the hourly chart. We did get above the 50 level on this intermediate move here, you can see, and then we came back through the 50 there pretty strongly. So this is a little bit of a range-bound area where we're crossing in and around the 50 But it is worth noting here, this does seem like we're ticking up here into tomorrow's session. Looking at the daily chart, you can see momentum did step down just slightly. Very, very small step down, 0.01 step down from the previous day. Not even really that close to the 50 line. You would want to see a pretty powerful move higher on the daily chart from here if we are going to move higher. Otherwise, you're just kind of stuck in a range here. And if we draw this out here, you can kind of see exactly what that looks like, where you have a pretty solid base here, pretty much right to where we're at. You can maybe move it up slightly, kind of like that. And then you can see this very decent declining level, kind of stuck here. We're not quite breaking out to the downside, and you would want to see a push to this previous level at about 106.50 and then a push higher to get above this 200-day moving average if we are going to go in the bullish direction. Moving over here to the VIX, this is not really what you want to see if we are going to go lower in stocks. We talked about this possibly being a double top. We did break that midpoint, and then it moved down very, very strongly back to that support level. We're back at the trend line, potentially testing that trend line and potentially moving higher from there. The amount of movement that we had here to the downside did look quite strong. You can see on the hourly chart, we did get into oversold conditions on RSI. Momentum on the EMAs of the MACD is moving down quite strongly. It is worth noting that momentum on the hourly chart is ticking to the bullish side just slightly, but the daily chart did step down quite strong from 0.29 to 0.2. It's a pretty big step on daily momentum for the VIX. Jumping over to the 4-hour here, you can see momentum still ticking down quite strongly. Even if we do get a slight rally tomorrow on the VIX, I would expect it to sell off at this previous resistance, probably around the 20 level. If we do get above the 20 level, however, then you should expect stocks to be moving down much stronger. And that would give me more inclination that this is going to be a continuation. If we just get a shorter term bounce to the 20 and then a continuation to the downside, then we're probably in a better bullish situation. Moving over to my accounts, I did okay. I definitely should have been a little bit better, but the market really did have quite a lot of swing to it. So we started to move down, and I was kind of biting into that move down. It was pretty strong in the early session in terms of bearish momentum. And then we found that bottom and really rallied pretty aggressively throughout the session. You can see still netted a profit, so did fairly well despite the volatility that we had throughout the day. But you can see all of the positions that I took here at the end of day are in a negative position. So definitely some questionable decisions. Probably should have took some profits on these 307 puts when I had the opportunity to do so, but I didn't. I ended up deciding to get assigned these shares, so that might have been a bad decision. You can see my cost basis here is 306.70 with the 30-cent credit that I got on those, which is not terrible. And you can see I already sold some calls here at 307 for $1.60. So between that, my cost basis is pretty close to 305. And then I have some 305 puts here for $1 that are already in a 40-cent loss position. Not great in terms of positioning, but you can see I am quite bullish, but I do have some negative deltas here with these 307 calls. I'm not opposed to rolling these down to 306 early in the session tomorrow. We'll see how that plays out. And then I ended up selling a 191 put here on the IWM for about 50 cents. So I'm trying to buy the IWM down at 190.50, which is about $2 lower than where we closed. Being pretty conservative on the IWM just because it did look a little bit weaker than the NASDAQ. You can see we were actually slightly down on the day compared to the NASDAQ, which was up almost 1% overall on the day move. So moderately bullish, but not overly bullish going into tomorrow's session. Let me know down in the comment section what you thought of the CPI data or where the markets are going tomorrow. Definitely like and subscribe if you got any value out of this video. Make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Of course, none of this is financial advice. This is all for entertainment purposes. Good luck in your trading and have a great day.